Welcome to Life Lessons from Srimad Bhagavatam, where each week, twice a week, we share a section of the Bhagavatam and discuss practical lessons that we can apply to integrate these teachings into our lives. And so today we continue with the 11th Canto of the Bhagavatam. We are discussing the third chapter, and it is a continuation of the questions that King Nimi asks of the Nine Yogendras. So this is a really philosophical section of the Bhagavatam, but also really wonderful. It's one of my favorite sections. I really appreciate the systematic exploration that King Nimi undertakes with the questions that he phrases, and then the responses from the Nine Yogendras are just so perfect as well. As usual, we will begin by chanting some verses to just set the mood and invocation to our chanting. And so we'll recite some nice verses, beginning with Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 2. Sutta Uvacha Yapra Vajantamanapetamapeta Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Kattara Ajhuhava Putriti Tanmayataya Taravo Binedus Tan Sarvavutta Hridayam Munimanantosmi. Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing the reformation by sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son!' Indeed, only the trees, which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation, echoed in response to the bereaved father." Text 3. Yasvanubhavamakila shruti sharamekam adyatmadipam atitirti satam tamondam samsarinam karunayaha purana guhyam tam vyasasunamapayami gurum muninam. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who, out of his great compassion for the gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of the material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. We'll chant one more of these verses. This will be text 3. Narayanam namaskritya naram cheva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udhirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Monica Sharma joining us from Sydney, Australia. Monica says, Hare Krishna. We have here Sri Gandharvika, my wife, joining us from New York City, the same city where I am speaking from today as well. Thank you for joining, Sri Gandharvika. Alicia joining from Auckland, New Zealand. Alicia says, Kia ora Prabhu, hope you're safe and well and watching from work. Excellent, well done, Alicia. Guess what, Alicia? I'm leaving for the airport in a few hours to come to Auckland. So hopefully we'll see you there soon. Shama Manjari joining us from South Africa says, Hare Krishna, Shri Prahlad Prabhuji, and dear devotees. Welcome, Shama Manjari in South Africa. Thank you for your commitment, being with us. as always, we have Kirtida joining us from Norway. Kirtida sends obeisances. We have Karishma sending a flower as well, but somehow I'm not able to highlight your comment here, Karishma. I apologize for that. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining. Nikunja joining from Auckland. Hey, Nikunja. Nikunja says, we're looking forward to your long-awaited in-person Sangha. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing all the devotees there in New Zealand as well in the not too distant future. We'll have a nice festival there over the next weekend. There we are. Krishna says, Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. Grateful to have you here. We also have Arti, who says Hare Krishna as well. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's dive in. We are discussing Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 3, verses 1 through to 16. This is a continuation, as we said earlier, of the discussion between King Nimi and the Nine Yogendras. A wonderful question. So if you remember in the previous class, King Nimi, he asked about bhakti. Then today he will ask about, then we had another question about the bhakta, the devotee. How do we understand who's a devotee? Actually, as I look at this now, I realize I skipped the bhakta, so I'm going to have to go back and do that. I apologize for the oversight. I jumped straight to Maya. Hopefully we won't read too much into that. This is an interesting question. What is Maya? Because if we look later in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, Sobari Muni, he will say to Lord Shiva that he's interested to know what is Maya. And he gets into some trouble asking that question. And there's a famous story about Narada Muni as well, asking Krishna, what is Maya? And Narada Muni finds himself basically in Maya. He finds himself very much entangled in worldly life. And then after some time, Krishna comes to him and says, see, that's my Maya. So what about King Nimi? He's asking, what is Maya? Will this get him into trouble? It doesn't. And so why not? I guess there's a difference between asking philosophically, so having a philosophical curiosity, versus being interested. I want to know what Maya's like. So I'm not sure that fully was Narada Muni's intention, but we do see different results in this curiosity, asking what Maya is. My sense is that Sobari Muni and Narada, they may have had a little, maybe too much curiosity, whereas we might say that King Nimi, he's asking philosophically here, what is Maya? So I think we must all be curious to know what is the answer to this question. So let's dive in. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We will discuss this under 3 headings. 1, King Nimi's question. I already told you what it is, but he phrases it in a beautiful way based on 11.3, 1 to 2, verses 1 to 2. And then the first part of the response, conditioning of the soul, verses 3 to 5. And then the third section will be withdrawing the material worlds, verses, this will be 6 to 16. So we begin with King Nimi's question. He's heard the response to his first 2 questions. What is bhakti? What is the bhakta? We're going to have to go back for that. And then he says, my next question is, please explain the illusory power of Lord Vishnu, Maya. He says, Maya confuses even great mystics. And he says, although I'm enjoying the wisdom that you're sharing about the Supreme Lord. I'm very thirsty for more of the spiritual knowledge. He says, these discussions about the Lord and his devotees are like medicine for our souls, particularly for people like me who are suffering in material existence. So, nice metaphor, comparing spiritual knowledge. Actually, we have two metaphors that come up in his language. He says, I'm thirsty. So it's like a nectar beverage that quenches the thirst of the devotee. We have some awakening of taste for hearing about Krishna, Krishna's philosophy, Krishna's teachings. So he says, I'm thirsty. I want to drink more of this. And then he says, it's like medicine. Sometimes we might have some ailment, and then we get some, let's say even just our skin is very dry and very cracked, and then we can put some nice moisturizer on it, and everything feels again. Our skin is soothed, and our body relaxes, and our mind relaxes as well. And so he says this transcendental knowledge is like that for me. It's like a medicine. It's curing my ailment, my struggle with material existence. And so, nice example for us. Sometimes we might think, well, I'm too busy to seek out spiritual knowledge. What about a king? King Nimi, he must have so many responsibilities. But here he's taking the time out. You have to make time. Whatever we consider important, we will make time for it. And so spiritual inquiry, Nimi, he's showing us, he believes that that is very important, and he's made time for it. We should also try to prioritize deeper spiritual inquiry in our busy lives as well. We make time for what matters to us. And then we're learning here this wisdom. It's not just information. There's a difference between information and knowledge. Information, there's so much data, so much information out there in the world on the internet. Knowledge is something that we take in and enrich ourselves with, enrich our lives with, and apply it in our lives. And as we apply it, we get more realization, and that's wisdom. And here, King Nimi, he's comparing that realized knowledge to medicine that's healing the heart and bringing about lasting peace as in our struggles with material existence. Let's go to our second topic then, where one of the Nine Yogendras, the 9 kings of yoga, Yoga Indra, he will answer King Nimi's question. This particular Yogendra's name is Antariksha. There are 9 brothers. We mentioned earlier, they're sons of Rishabdev. Although Rishabdev is a Kshatriya king, he ruled the lands, he had 100 sons. 9 of them are Paramahansas. And so they're going to each respond to Nimi's questions. So Antariksha, he will explain now, what is Maya? He says the Supreme Soul creates all living beings in various forms. And he gives every living being a choice to pursue enjoyment in the material nature or liberation from material existence. He says, when the soul tries to enjoy the material nature and identifies with the material body, then the soul gets caught up in Krishna's illusory energy, and that is Maya. Such a nice explanation, huh? When we choose not to be with Krishna, but to enjoy separately, to enjoy the material nature, and we identify with our body, senses, we identify with these sense objects as the source of our happiness, the body as our identity, the extension of the body, the ego identity. That is Maya. And so in this, he says, the soul is driven by deep desires and is influenced by the three qualities of the material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And this leads to cycles of happiness and distress. And because of these actions, the soul gets trapped up in samsara, repeated birth and death, moving helplessly from one body to the next. He says, from one difficult situation to the next. And so we have a very nice explanation here of what is Maya. We can pause here and reflect. Antariksha's explanation of Maya, starting with Krishna creating the living beings and the power to choose, choice. So Maya then comes about on account of our misuse of our ability to choose, our misuse of our free will. Now let's think about that in more practical terms, because we might be describing some historical event at the beginning, like pre-dawn, pre-creation. It is said the conditioning of the soul is anadi, without beginning. But then let's think about that in a practical terms, in terms of our everyday. Every single day, we have this free will. Every single day, we have this ability to choose Krishna or Maya. Every single day, we can choose to serve Krishna, to see everything in relation to Krishna, to recognize everything as Krishna's energy, to recognize ourselves as Krishna's parts and parcels. Or we can choose Maya, to try to enjoy the material nature separately from him, to ignore Krishna, to try to be the enjoyers ourselves, and thereby to identify with our material body as the self, identify with a certain ego, and then the extensions of the body as also as our as ourselves, my, I, me, and mine. I am this body, I am a man, I am Australian, I'm a New Zealander, and then this body is me, and then these things, these clothes, these glasses, this computer, this, all these things are mine, and it's all an extension of that ego identity. When we see it separately from Krishna, that is Maya. So every day we have this opportunity to choose, and when we choose to see these things separate from Krishna, we perpetuate Maya. We go deeper into Maya. And when we choose to see everything in relation to Krishna, to see it as Krishna's energy, to see ourselves and all things to be engaged in his service for his pleasure, then we unravel that conditioning. So this is very powerful for you and I to recognize the power of our choices. When we do so, we can consciously steer our lives towards Krishna. We can engage our lives as an offering of bhakti, and that'll free ourselves from the cycle of samsara. So our choices are shaping our destiny. Therefore, we need to be conscious of the choices we're making day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, to be conscious. And Prabhupada called that Krishna consciousness. And he called his movement the Krishna consciousness movement. He called it the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. All right, let's go to our third topic. Antariksha continues to explain. We have titled this section as Withdrawing the Material Worlds. He says, when the end of the material world approaches, the Supreme Lord, in his form as eternal time, gradually withdraws the entire universe back into unmanifestation. He winds up the material creation. He says, first there is a great drought, and this lasts for 100 years, where the sun's heat gets stronger and stronger, and it dries up the material worlds. And then he says that a fire begins in the lower realms, in Patala Loka, coming from the mouths of Lord Shankarshana. And it gets pushed up with very strong winds. The flames shoot upwards. Vatala is at the bottom. There are 14 planetary systems. And so these flames come up and they cause so much heat throughout the material universe. They burn everything in their path. And this intense heat causes rain. Right now, we are here in the US, we are in summer, and sometimes in the summer, then you'll also get very, very intense heat, and then you'll get very intense rain. Or I was just speaking with Indranjuna Maharaj, he's in India, and he said in India now it's the monsoon season. So there's been lots and lots of heat, and then this heat creates rainfall as well. Like if you are cooking, and if you have water boiling at the bottom of the pot by the flame, and then that creates condensation. And then when you lift the pot lid, there'll be all of this wet, all of this hot air, and even condensation on the lid of the bottom of the lid of the pot. So that happens in the universe. It creates the heat from Shankarshana's flaming mouths create great rainfall. And these form as Shamvartaka clouds. They bring torrential rains and cause a flood throughout the universe, submerging everything. Now, when I mention Shamvartaka clouds, some of you will think, oh, I've heard of those before. So where might you have heard of the Shamvartaka clouds before? You can put that into the chat. That's one of your quizzes for today in our life lessons from Srimad Bhagavatam. What are these Shamvartaka clouds? Where else might you have heard about them? Okay, so once the Shamvartaka clouds create that great flood, even in the partial inundation of the universes, there's a great flood between the Manvantaras. That's when Matsya comes, and he leads the Saptarishis through the flood. That's the partial inundation. What is being described here by Antariksha is the full annihilation of the material universe that happens at the end of Brahma's day. And so Antariksha says that once the universe gets submerged with water, Brahma, the universal being, gives up his cosmic body and merges with the unmanifest nature, like a fire that has burned out. So Brahma is also called Virat. And his body, like Vishnu has a universal form, this universe is his body. Sometimes Brahma is also described in those terms. So as his body gets hot, like a fever throughout the material universe, and then it gets flooded, then it's time for Brahma to go. Brahma but dies, basically. Yeah, when Hiranyakashipu asked for benedictions, he wanted immortality. Brahma said, I can't give you immortality. Even though I live for a long time, I too must die. And so Brahma dies, and his body then is going to be, his body dies. The universe dies, so to speak. Brahma leaves his body. And so Antariksha describes how the elements are wound up. The creation, the elements are produced, 24 material elements. In the annihilation, they are wound up. And so the flooding waters, they take away the quality, and the wind, they take away the aroma from the earth. And so the earth loses its quality, and it's transformed into water with the flood, right? Gets dissolved. And then the water gets dried up by the wind, and it gets merged with fire. And so it loses its quality. And then the fire gets deprived of its form, he says, by darkness, and it's dissolved into the element of air. And then when air loses its quality of touch by the influence of space, it merges into space. And then when space is merged of its tangible quality, it's the quality of sound, right? By the Supreme Soul, In the form of time, space merges into false ego in the mode of ignorance. And then the material senses and intelligence merge into ego in the mode of passion, from whence they had arisen. And then the mind, along with the demigods, merge into the false ego in the mode of goodness, from which it had arisen. Finally, false ego, along with its qualities, merge into the Mahatattva. And then the Mahatattva, once it is no longer activated, merges into Pradhan. And Pradhan is the unmanifested nature that merges into the body of Mahavishnu. So in this way, the Lord's Maya display is wound up, like sometimes compared to a spider that winds up its web. The spider isn't increased and not decreased, whether it creates the web or whether it withdraws the web. The spider remains the same in terms of its quality. And so Krishna, he spins his web of Maya and then he unravels it and withdraws it again. He uses it to create, maintain, and eventually dissolve the universes in different cycles. So we can again pause here. We can reflect. Antariksha's description of the withdrawal of the universe reminds us that everything in this material nature, no matter how grand, it has its beginning, its middle, and finally, it has its end. The universe, it will one day dissolve back into its original state. Similarly, all the things that we hold dear, possessions, achievements, bodies, they will also dissolve again into the material nature. And when we're aware of this, doesn't mean we reject them. They are Krishna's energy. They're given to us. That's his benediction upon us as well. We use them in his service, but we also have to recognize their limitations and their impermanence. We use them as in service as part of our journey, but we recognize that it's the vehicle that's taking us somewhere. We shouldn't get attached to the vehicle itself. You ride your bike or you take a taxi or a train or a plane to get to a destination. And so these material possessions or achievements, bodies that we have, they are tools that we use to get to a destination in our journey. We mustn't be overly attached to them. Recognize that they are transitory for us. By recognizing this, we can learn to live with a sense of what is ultimately important and be sure to be investing our time and energy in that which will endure beyond the material frame. It's also interesting that yogis actually use this knowledge to very consciously in their yoga practice withdraw their or raise their consciousness by raising their consciousness or awareness through the chakras, which represent the different elements as well. So they withdraw from one earth element to the water element to the fire element to the air to the ether and so on as they move their consciousness through these different energy centers, finally bringing the soul to the Brahmarandra and then allowing the soul to depart from the material body. That's the mechanical process. Our process, of course, is to engage our senses and the energy of the sense objects in Krishna's service, day to day, minute to minute, year to year, month to month, year to year. And we raise our consciousness that way in Krishna consciousness. Let's conclude with a prayer. Beloved Krishna, O eternal source of wisdom and light, we come to you as King Nimi approached the Nine Yogendras, seeking to unravel the veil of Maya that shrouds our vision. In the midst of life's demands and the noise of the world, grant us the strength to prioritize the pursuit of your divine truth. Let our hearts remain forever thirsty for the nectar of your wisdom. For in your infinite glory lies the peace that soothes our weary souls. Guide us, dear Lord, in making choices that lead us closer to you. May we resist the pull of fleeting desires and instead choose the path of eternal fulfillment. Remind us, Krishna, of the impermanence of all material things, that we may detach from the transient and invest our lives in what truly endures. In every breath, in every moment, may we align our hearts with your eternal purpose, finding true fulfillment and purpose in your love. So there we conclude. Let me acknowledge some of you who joined us as we started speaking. Actually, I think we have everyone. This is RT. I think we acknowledged you earlier. Thanks for being with us, RT. And then Nikunja says, when the Lord... okay. Sri Gandharvika has an answer to the question about Samvartaka. Govardhan Leela. Yes, that's where we hear about the Samvartaka clouds. And then Nikunja gives some more details here as well. When Lord Indra summons the Samvartaka clouds to inundate Vrindavan Dham because the residents were worshipping Giriraj instead of Indra. Absolutely. Samvartaka clouds, go destroy Vrindavan. They have stopped the sacrifice which was meant for me. A little song we learned in school. Nikunja says, Lord Indra. Kirtidas says, thank you. And Gandaki Dasi says, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna to all of you. I didn't manage to get the Instagram working. Oops. So no one to greet there. Thank you all for joining for our discussion here. It's an honor and a pleasure to share with you. Our next class, I will be in New Zealand, and I hope to be able to give the class from New Zealand. It'll be 9 a.m. on Thursday. I think I get in on Wednesday, even though I'm leaving here on Monday. So I hope to give that class on from there. And that'll be, Thursday there. Let's see. I'll try. And then the Monday class wouldn't happen because I'll be traveling. I'll be in the air. That's next week. But otherwise, I will give the class later this week. Stay well, everybody. May you deepen in your love and appreciation for hearing, remembering, learning, glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. May you deepen in your taste for chanting Krishna's holy name with attention and relish. May you deepen in your appreciation for Krishna in the form of Sri Vigraha, who accepts our services and offerings. So I have the wrong title here. May you deepen in your taste for and appreciation for Sri Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur Dham, and other holy dhams. And most importantly, what gets us through all of this, what helps us to develop these appreciations is the association of devotees. May you deepen in your appreciation for devotees, your friendship with devotees, your love for devotees, your service to devotees, taking every opportunity to associate with Vaishnavas in these different ways. And with these practices, may your heart soften with compassion for all living beings that drives you to share the treasures of bhakti with others. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Prema